College football's weirdest team is no more. The Simon Fraser football program was officially disbanded recently. That comes more than 18 months after the school first announced it was dropping football. You have to go back even further than that for the last time Simon Fraser actually took to the football field. That would have been in 2022 when the Red Leafs, formerly known as the Clansmen, crushed West Texas A&M 46-14. It would be the lone bright spot during a 1-9 campaign. However, when that victory concluded, no one actually knew this would be the school's last football game. Canada's only entrant into the NCAA has always existed in this odd space, a weird anomaly that was both admirable and confusing. Nothing about what those plucky upstarts over in Burnaby, British Columbia were doing made a lot of sense. Honestly though, it felt as if school leadership didn't always know what it was doing either. When Simon Fraser football upset the Buffaloes at the end of 2022, it was hailed as a welcome to the Lone Star Conference moment. Maybe even a sign things were finally heading in the right direction for a football program that hadn't had a heck of a lot of success since moving over to NCAA Division II in 2010. That came after a spell playing Canadian rules football during the 2000s and the country's USports setup, and before that, an even longer spell in NAIA. Things were turning alright, but not necessarily in a direction that anyone saw coming. The Lone Star Conference announced SFU was to be booted upon conclusion of the 2023 season. Then, for whatever reason, the Simon Fraser administration was like, you know what, we're going to do you one better. We're going to eliminate the football program right here and now. It was a decision that made little sense to anyone, seeing as it came in April with the season some 5 months away. Players and coaches were very much screwed by this announcement, and I mean, no one saw it coming. Like, they were still out recruiting up until March, so this was just seemingly a spur-of-the-moment decision by those running the school and its athletic department. It would actually end up creating more headaches than SFU probably envisioned. A lawsuit was filed by players, and then it was revealed the school had actually put in next to no effort in trying to maintain its football program. As an Idaho alum and someone who witnessed the decision to drop down from FBS to FCS, I can safely say those running Simon Fraser basically copied the Chuck Staben playbook on incompetence. Seriously, screw that guy. Anyway, SFU did hire an outside consultant to determine the feasibility of football at the school moving forward. In due course, that firm, McLaren Global Sports Solutions, would come to the conclusion many felt the school hired him to come to in the first place: that football was not feasible for Simon Fraser. However, alumni and boosters, those associated with the football program, have long maintained they were never consulted on anything, that the school just unilaterally made these decisions. What's more, it seems as if they were basically boxed out by the administration, who pulled the plug and then hired a guy who made sure it stayed unplugged, which of course was one of the reasons why that lawsuit would be filed. To better understand what is admittedly a complex situation, I think we need to understand the history, the very weird history of Simon Fraser football. SFU began the sport in 1965 when the school first opened with a grand proclamation from Chancellor Gordon Shrum, who stated, "One day, its very own football team would be playing in the Rose Bowl." Of course, we know they would never make it to Pasadena. In fact, the closest they ever came was an away game against UC Riverside in 1972. You know, if I think about it, that's not a million miles away from the Rose Bowl. Geographically speaking, at least. In reality, though, the school pursued life in America's college athletic system so they could offer athletic scholarships, something not permitted in Canada's weird university athletic system until decades later. Those early years would see the school match up with a handful of odd junior varsity sides from big programs like Washington State, a lot of junior college matchups, and there were some local Canadian colleges they would line up against as well. Most notably, the University of British Columbia in what was dubbed the Shrum Bowl. As more structure came to college football during the 70s and the 80s, Simon Fraser finally began to understand just where it fit in the entire ecosystem. During its run as an NAIA program, the SFU Clansmen, named after the Scots and not the racist, would face off against some pretty high profile, some pretty notable schools over the years. We're talking the likes of Montana, Montana State, Portland State, Nevada, Cal Poly, Idaho, and Eastern Washington. They won some, lost others, and then as the sport begins to consolidate as the 1980s progress, SFU found their level to be NAIA, where there were other schools littered across the Pacific Northwest to play. Eventually, they settled in the Columbia Football Association and would remain there until it disappeared in 2000. As that conference was disintegrating during the mid-1990s, Simon Fraser would actually make a play to move over to NCAA Division II. That, of course, was where many of their league mates were heading, while that are down to Division III. However, those running college athletics in America said thanks but no thanks to the Canadian interlopers. 2001 is spent as a football independent playing American schools, then SFU opts to play Canadian football for a few seasons against other schools up north. However, during this time, they continue to angle for that elusive NCAA Division II invitation for their athletic department. On the football field, results were sort of mixed. The now Red Leafs twice made the Canada West playoffs, but thrice finished winless. The school would finally get its wish, that invite from the NCAA to join the ranks of Division II in 2010. The move was more for all of the other sports and not necessarily football. I mean, football had its place, but the focus was on the entire athletic department. It had a good fit in the Great Northwest Athletic Conference. Perhaps even more importantly is that it allowed Simon Fraser to make the claim that it was Canada's very first NCAA school. Honestly, at times, I feel like being able to make that statement was the main reason the school made the switch. Regardless, the GNAC football conference was just sort of there. The school we know today as Dixie State was in their ranks along with the last remaining D2 programs on the West Coast. By the end of the decade, though, things are really hanging on by a thread. Humboldt State drops football after the 2018 season. Then Azusa Pacific would drop football a little later, meaning the conference was left with 3 members heading into the 2020s. The GNAC just opts to drop football altogether with no new members to recruit. There was no one on the West Coast they could bring in to restock their conference, so they just said, screw it, we're going to punt on it. The Lone Star Conference throws a life preserver to Simon Fraser, Central Washington, and Western Oregon. However, there were some issues with those Lone Star Conference schools traveling to Canada, which saw a handful of home games move to Blaine, Washington. Making matters worse, it's not like the team was all of that good or gave the LSC a reason to keep them around. Simon Fraser was 18-99 as a Division II program. The final victory over West Texas A&M notwithstanding, the Red Leafs or Clansmen or whatever you want to call them had become cannon fodder, which is sort of sad considering the team was pretty competitive during its NAIA days. I mean, the school actually boasts victories over Montana, Nevada, and Eastern Washington. That is admittedly really cool for this Canadian American football playing program. Here's the deal. I fully understand why Simon Fraser ended its football program. It was stuck in a no man's land. Division III, the non-scholarship level of college football and college athletics, wasn't an option because then Simon Fraser would have had to take all of their teams there and no longer offer sports scholarships. NAIA, same thing. You have to move your entire athletic department to that classification. Meanwhile, playing Canadian football at the USports level could have possibly ran afoul of the NCAA. It was going to be a headache. Life, meanwhile, as a Division II independent, where only 2 schools could be considered nearby, wasn't exactly the most palatable option available. We're talking lots of flights and lots of expenses. I mean, even though the school has said money wasn't really a factor in the decision, it's pretty obvious money was somewhat a factor in the decision. The issue isn't that Simon Fraser dropped football, it was that no one at the school had the fortitude to take ownership of the decision and face people, to answer the tough questions and to look those who the decision impacted in the eye and give them a straight answer. They unilaterally end football in 2023 with a press release. That's it. It was a decision that blindsided a lot of folks associated with the football program. Then they hired an outside consultant to hammer the last nails in the coffin. Why not give stakeholders a proper explanation, or better yet, tell them what the program needed to survive a deadline and put it in their hands, make them the ones responsible. That's all anyone really wanted here. Perhaps most laughable of all was that initial press release which revealed that football was ending at Simon Fraser. It contained a note that essentially stated they didn't consult with anyone. They had like a few brief conversations with a couple of conferences, but that was it. They did no legwork here. The school would also go on to say the decision was made because, quote, it is impossible for the university to ensure its ability to field a full or competitive team for the fall. Come on, SFU had won 3 games in total over the past 6 seasons. If competitiveness was a concern, why didn't you end the program after those 3 straight 0-win seasons between 2015 and 2017? And again, this decision was made in April. It would have been easier to just play out the year and go from there than to stop altogether. Seriously, football coaches were offering recruits as late as March 2023. There was no reason to not give everyone involved a longer runway. Let coaches have that season. Let recruits have that season. Just give everyone a chance to put things on tape and line up other opportunities. But then to make matters worse, the school needed to hire an outside consultant to reach the conclusion they had already reached. Those people, they ain't cheap, by the way. Alas, it was not meant to be for college football's weirdest team. You know, Simon Fraser, they don't have any championships. They don't have much in the way of accolades, but they do have a very odd and very rich history, at least when it comes to American football. Finally, Simon Fraser's college football legacy in America will sort of live on this season. Former SFU head coach Thomas Ford was named as the head coach of Idaho. Go Vandals, and thank you for watching this video. For the story of how Louisiana Tech was boned out of a bowl bid by a very mediocre Notre Dame team, check out the video in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. And to learn why promotion and relegation, they just aren't going to work in college football, video lower left-hand corner of your screen. Until next time, I am Cheyenne Hollis. This is The Touchback. Simon Fraser football, you will be missed. And until next time, hashtag take it out to the 25.